Carson was the most brilliant straight man ever, but mean son of a. Fox was starting the network, and they approached us, Rupert Murdoch and Barry Dillon, and they said, when your contract's up, we will give you everything that you have now, plus 5-year guarantee and $15 million. We couldn't get an answer from NBC whether they were renewing me, which they would totally renew me. They were in shock when I left. But they just weren't coming through, and the money sucked. They were paying me.
Johnny Carson banned Joan Rivers from The Tonight Show after she made the biggest mistake of her career, believing NBC actually cared about her future.
Then when it was all done, they were going to announce it. I said, I want to call. And I called 4 people myself, and the first was Johnny to tell him, and he hung up on me. He said, Johnny, it's Joan, and I think I'm leaving the show. I have my own show at Fox, and click.
That phone call ended 20 years of friendship in 10 seconds. Carson didn't just hang up, he declared war.
And he never spoke to me again. Ever. I would, now, dissolve. I was fired from Fox, my husband committed. I was out of work, I was broke, I couldn't get myself arrested.
The ban destroyed everything Rivers had worked for, but losing Carson's friendship was nothing compared to what came next.
How was it returning after 20 years?
28 years.
Whoa.
Banned for 28 years, and Jimmy Fallon said, this is stupid, come on back.
28 years later, Rivers finally returned to The Tonight Show, but the damage Carson inflicted lasted far longer than his ban. Joan Rivers spent 3 years being rejected by The Tonight Show before she ever got her big break. 7 auditions, 7 rejections, 7 different people telling her she wasn't right for Johnny Carson's show. But in February 1965, everything changed with one appearance that would define both her career and her eventual downfall. Rivers had been grinding in Greenwich Village comedy clubs alongside Woody Allen, George Carlin, and Richard Pryor, but she was different. She was a woman in a business that barely tolerated female comedians. When she finally got her shot on Carson's couch, she wasn't even brought on as a stand-up comic. They positioned her as a funny girl writer who happened to be entertaining.
They were going to. They all said, well, of course you're staying with us. Hey, I'm a nervous person. Where's my contract? But it became business.
During her first appearance, he did something he rarely did. He told a guest on air that they were going to be a star. Those words changed Rivers' life instantly. Club bookings poured in, and more importantly, Carson invited her back again and again. Over the next 20 years, Rivers would appear on The Tonight Show nearly 100 times. She became Carson's most trusted guest host, filling in whenever he took time off. Their on-screen chemistry was undeniable. She could match his wit, play off his timing, and hold her own with the biggest names in entertainment. But their relationship was purely professional. Carson was famously aloof off-camera, rarely socializing with his guests or even his staff. Rivers later said they had little contact outside of the show, but she considered him her mentor and the father figure of her career. He had made her a star with one sentence, and she never forgot that debt.
He was angry because I left the show to go do my own show.
By the early 1980s, Rivers had established herself as one of America's top comedians. She was selling out concerts, releasing comedy albums, and building a multimedia empire. But she was still primarily known as Johnny Carson's guest host rather than as a star in her own right. The problem was that NBC executives were treating her exactly that way. Despite her obvious value to the network and her proven ability to deliver ratings, they refused to offer her a long-term contract or any guarantees about her future with The Tonight Show. When rumors began circulating about Carson's eventual retirement, Rivers wasn't even mentioned as a possible replacement. This lack of respect from NBC was particularly galling because Rivers had remained loyal to Carson when other opportunities had come along. She had turned down offers to host her own shows multiple times out of loyalty to the man who had launched her career. But by 1985, that loyalty was starting to feel one-sided. Carson was making millions while Rivers was being paid what she later described as peanut money. NBC executives took her for granted, assuming she would always be available whenever Carson needed a fill-in, but never treating her as a priority or offering her the kind of security that her level of talent and popularity deserved. In 1985, Rupert Murdoch's fledgling Fox network was desperate to make a splash that would establish them as legitimate competition to the big three networks. They had only 5 affiliate stations and no credibility, but they had money and ambition. When Fox executives approached Joan Rivers about hosting her own late-night talk show, they weren't just offering her a job, they were offering her a chance to make history.
Fox was starting the network, and they approached us, Rupert Murdoch and Barry Diller. And they said, when your contract's up, we will give you everything that you have now, plus 5-year guarantee and $15 million. When $15 million meant something, which was just over the moon money.
The deal was irresistible. $15 million over 5 years, complete creative control, and the opportunity to become the first woman to host a major network late-night talk show. Rivers would be going head-to-head with Carson, but Fox assured her they weren't trying to destroy The Tonight Show. They just wanted to offer viewers an alternative. The timing seemed perfect. Rivers' contract with NBC was expiring, and despite her years of loyalty and proven rating success, the network still hadn't offered her any long-term security. NBC executives had been stringing her along for months with vague promises about renewal while refusing to put anything in writing. Rivers found herself in an impossible position. She was approaching 50 years old in an industry that was notoriously ageist toward women. This might be her only chance to step out of Carson's shadow and prove she could succeed as more than just someone's substitute. The Fox offer represented everything she had been working toward her entire career. But there was one major problem. Fox wanted to keep the deal secret until they were ready to make their official announcement. They were concerned that if Carson and NBC learned about the negotiations early, they might retaliate by banning Rivers from The Tonight Show before Fox was ready to launch, leaving her without any television platform for months.
David Brenner had his own show, and they cut him off a year before his own show, so he had no exposure. Cosby was doing something, they cut him off. So Edgar said, if they get wind of this, you won't be seen till Fox revs up. You will not be on television for at least a year to a year and a half. This must be kept quiet till it's time.
The secrecy requirement put Rivers in an ethical bind. Carson had been her mentor and champion for 20 years. She owed her career to him, and keeping such a major decision secret felt like a betrayal of their relationship. But she also knew that Carson could be vindictive when crossed, and she couldn't afford to be shut out of television at such a crucial moment in her career. Rivers convinced herself that she would handle the situation properly when the time came. She would call Carson personally before the announcement, explain her reasoning, and hopefully get his blessing for her new venture. She believed that their professional relationship was strong enough to survive her departure, and that Carson would understand her need to advance her own career. What Rivers didn't fully grasp was how Carson would interpret her move. In his mind, guest hosts were supposed to be grateful for the opportunity he provided them, not use that platform to launch competing shows. He had made Rivers famous, and now she was going to use that fame to try to steal his audience. The decision to accept Fox's offer was both the smartest and most catastrophic choice Rivers ever made. It would establish her as a television pioneer and prove that she could succeed independently, but it would also cost her the most important professional relationship of her life and set in motion a chain of events that would end in tragedy. The moment of truth came in 1986 when Fox was ready to announce Joan Rivers' new late-night show. After months of secret negotiations and careful planning, Rivers finally had to make the call she had been dreading. She was about to tell Johnny Carson that she was leaving The Tonight Show to become his competitor. Rivers had rehearsed what she would say. She would thank Carson for everything he had done for her career, explain that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity she couldn't pass up, and hopefully get his blessing for her new venture. She genuinely believed that their 20-year professional relationship was strong enough to survive her departure.
I said, Johnny, it's Joan, and I think I'm leaving the show. I have my own show at Fox, and clicked. So then I called him back, and I said, Johnny, and he clicked down again. He would not hear me. Not. And it was terrible.
The conversation lasted less than 10 seconds. Carson heard the words, "I have my own show at Fox," and immediately hung up on her. Rivers was stunned. She had expected some disappointment, maybe even anger, but not this immediate, complete rejection. When she called back, hoping to explain herself better, Carson wouldn't even let her speak. What Rivers didn't understand was that Carson felt personally betrayed. In his mind, she hadn't just taken a job with a competitor. She had used the platform he provided to build her own career, then turned around and stabbed him in the back. He saw her move to Fox as an act of ingratitude and disloyalty that was unforgivable. Carson's reaction was swift and brutal. He not only banned Rivers from ever appearing on The Tonight Show again, but he made it clear to the entire entertainment industry that anyone who appeared on Rivers' Fox show would also be banned from his program. This effectively blacklisted Rivers from accessing A-list guests, making her job exponentially harder.
And then lied, said I never called him. And then NBC got on the bandwagon, because it's all money. Fox, their show is competing with him now. I was vilified in the press, and I was told that I left the cars. I said, my contract was up, and you guys haven't come to me. You've been asking me for a year. They just never thought I'd go anywhere.
The ban wasn't just about protecting Carson's ratings. It was about sending a message to anyone else who might consider betraying him. Carson wanted to make sure that Rivers failed spectacularly, both as punishment for her disloyalty and as a warning to other potential defectors. What made the situation even worse was Carson's public denial that Rivers had ever called him. He told the press that he had learned about her Fox show through media reports, painting her as someone who had snuck away without even the courtesy of a goodbye. This narrative made Rivers look ungrateful and unprofessional. While positioning Carson as the wrong mentor, Rivers was devastated by Carson's response. She had expected some difficulty, but not this level of personal animosity from someone she had considered a father figure. The man who had launched her career was now actively trying to destroy it, and she was powerless to defend herself against his influence in the industry. The phone call that was supposed to be a professional courtesy had instead become a declaration of war. Carson had decided that Joan Rivers was now his enemy, and he was going to use every bit of his power and influence to make sure she paid for her betrayal. The Late Show starring Joan Rivers premiered on October 9th, 1986, making Rivers the first woman to host a major network late-night talk show. It should have been the crowning achievement of her career. Instead, it became the beginning of the worst year of her life. The problem started immediately. Johnny Carson's ban on guests who appeared on Rivers' show made booking A-list celebrities nearly impossible. Stars who might have supported Rivers privately were afraid to cross Carson publicly, knowing that a Tonight Show ban could seriously damage their careers. Some local Fox affiliates even refused to air Rivers' show out of loyalty to Carson.
I suddenly became Carson's rival, which was stupid. I was going on Fox. Fox had 5 stations in those days. Carson absolutely tried to me, really, not physically myself.
Rivers was right. The rivalry was absurd. Fox had only 5 affiliate stations compared to NBC's nationwide network. Carson's audience was never in any real danger from Rivers' fledgling show. But Carson's ego couldn't tolerate even the perception that someone he had mentored was now competing against him. Behind the scenes at Fox, Rivers was discovering that her dream job was actually a nightmare. Her husband, Edgar Rosenberg, who was serving as the show's producer, was constantly clashing with Fox executives Rupert Murdoch and Barry Diller. The network wanted total control over the show's content and direction, while Rivers and Rosenberg wanted the creative freedom they had been promised. The fights were constant and petty. Fox executives argued with Rivers and Rosenberg about everything from the Coke versus Pepsi machine in the green room to whether they should serve M&Ms or Hershey Kisses. What should have been minor production decisions became major battles over control and respect. The ratings were disappointing from the start, and they only got worse as word spread about the backstage chaos. Rivers found herself trapped between Carson's external warfare and Fox's internal dysfunction. She was fighting a battle on 2 fronts that she couldn't win. The final blow came when Fox demanded that Rivers fire her husband as the show's producer. Edgar had been her business partner and creative collaborator for their entire marriage. Firing him would have meant admitting that their vision for the show was wrong and that Fox executives knew better than they did about comedy and entertainment.
I think he was so isolated that he probably didn't even know that they weren't even giving me another contract. They were going to. They all said, well, of course you're staying with us.
Rivers refused to fire Edgar, so on May 15th, 1987, just 7 months after the show premiered, Fox fired them both. Rivers had gambled everything on her Fox show, burning bridges with Carson and NBC, only to lose everything when the new network decided she was more trouble than she was worth. The failure of the Fox show was humiliating enough, but what happened next would turn professional disappointment into personal tragedy. Edgar Rosenberg, the man who had believed in Joan Rivers' dreams enough to risk everything alongside her, was about to pay the ultimate price for their shared ambition. Rivers had lost her mentor, her show, and her reputation. Soon she would lose something much more important than her career. 3 months after being fired from Fox, Joan Rivers faced a crisis that made her professional problems seem trivial. On August 14, 1987, her husband Edgar Rosenberg took his own life in a Philadelphia hotel room, leaving behind a wife, a daughter, and 3 heartbreaking tapes that would haunt Rivers for the rest of her life. Edgar had been devastated by the Fox debacle. As the show's producer, he felt personally responsible for its failure and for the damage it had done to Joan's career. The man who had managed every aspect of his wife's professional life for over 20 years couldn't handle being seen as the reason for her downfall.
I was fired from Fox. My husband committed. I was out of work. I was broke. I couldn't get myself arrested. I would see him in a restaurant. He still wouldn't talk to me.
Even as Rivers was dealing with the worst tragedy of her personal life, Carson's ban remained in effect. She would encounter him at industry events and restaurants, hoping for some acknowledgement of their shared history or even basic human sympathy for her loss. But Carson would ignore her completely, treating her as if she didn't exist. This devastated Rivers in ways that went beyond grief. Edgar had been her business partner, creative collaborator, and the father of her child. His death left her not just emotionally shattered, but also professionally rudderless. She had no show, no income, and now no partner to help her rebuild her career. Melissa Rivers, who was just 19 years old, initially blamed her mother for her father's death. The teenager felt that Joan's ambition and the Fox disaster had created the pressures that drove Edgar to. Their relationship became so strained that they barely spoke for months. Rivers found herself completely isolated. Carson's blacklist made her unemployable in television. Her daughter blamed her for her husband's death. The entertainment industry, which thrives on success and popularity, wanted nothing to do with someone who had become associated with failure and tragedy.
I'm dead. Put a blanket over me. Bad man.
This moment of despair reveals the depth of Rivers' pain. She felt completely defeated, professionally dead, personally destroyed, and abandoned by the industry that had once celebrated her. Carson's continued coldness during this period was particularly cruel, showing that his anger trumped any basic human compassion. Rivers later admitted that she considered herself during this dark period. The combination of professional failure, personal loss, and social isolation was almost overwhelming. She survived only because she felt responsible for showing Melissa that there was another way to handle despair besides Edgar's tragic choice. The irony was that Rivers' original decision to leave Carson's show had been motivated by her desire for security and independence. She wanted to build something that belonged to her, rather than always being dependent on someone else's goodwill. Instead, she had lost everything and found herself more vulnerable than ever. Carson's refusal to acknowledge her during this period revealed the true depth of his anger and the limits of his compassion. Whatever father-daughter relationship they had shared professionally was now completely dead, replaced by a coldness that would persist until Carson's own death in 2005. The comeback that followed Edgar Rosenberg's became one of the most remarkable resurrections in entertainment history. Joan Rivers spent the next decade clawing her way back from professional death and personal devastation, ultimately emerging stronger and more successful than she had ever been before. In 1989, Rivers launched The Joan Rivers Show, a daytime talk show that became an immediate hit. Unlike her doomed Fox venture, this show played to Rivers' strengths, her ability to connect with people, her fearless interviewing style, and her willingness to tackle controversial topics that other hosts avoided.
So Leno, Jay wouldn't let you on the show either because of Johnny.
Yeah, well, you know, everything turns, everything moves on, and I managed to survive without them.
The band continued through Carson's retirement and into Jay Leno's tenure as Tonight Show host. Leno later admitted that he kept Rivers off the show out of respect for Johnny, even after Carson was no longer involved with the program. The band had taken on a life of its own, becoming an unwritten rule that survived changes in management and shifts in industry attitudes. Rivers rebuilt her career through sheer determination and adaptability. She conquered daytime television, won a Daytime Emmy, and established herself as a multimedia personality. Her jewelry and fashion lines on QVC generated over $1 billion in sales, proving that she could succeed in business as well as entertainment. In the mid-1990s, Rivers and her daughter Melissa pioneered red carpet coverage for E!, transforming awards show pre-shows from boring celebrity spotting into must-see television. Their question, "Who are you wearing?" became a cultural catchphrase, and their irreverent commentary changed how Americans viewed celebrity culture. The band finally ended in 2014 when Jimmy Fallon took over The Tonight Show. Fallon, who represented a new generation of late-night hosts, saw the Carson-Rivers feud as ancient history that had no relevance to his version of the program. He invited Rivers back for his debut episode, ending 28 years of exile. Even after everything that had happened between them, Rivers never stopped acknowledging Carson's genius or his importance to her career.
Carson was the most brilliant straight man ever, but mean son of a bitch.
She could call him a bad man for how he treated her personally, while still recognizing him as the most brilliant straight man ever, professionally. This ability to separate personal hurt from professional respect was one of Rivers' greatest strengths. She had been wounded by Carson's rejection, devastated by the industry blacklist, and traumatized by her husband's. But she never let those experiences turn her bitter or destroy her love for the business that had given her so much pain and so much joy. Rivers died just 6 months after her return to The Tonight Show, at the age of 81. She had spent nearly half a century proving that Johnny Carson was wrong to ban her, and that talent combined with determination could overcome any obstacle. Even the wrath of the king of late night, the woman Carson tried to destroy, had outlasted him, outworked him, and ultimately proven that she never needed his approval to succeed. The band that was meant to end her career had instead become the motivation for her greatest triumphs. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Bye.